There were a lot of fantastic moments in Part 2 of the 1000-Year Blood War arc anime, but for a devoted reader of the source material like myself, the absolute best parts were the most unexpected. The anime-only additions to the story and lore that many of us have been waiting years for with bated breath. Of these additions, the biggest for me was the teaser of the Soul King's history and fate, the brief glimpses of the Soul Society's original sin, and the catalyst for the current state of the very world of Bleach itself. Let me be clear, we got nothing of the sort in the original material. To this day, the Soul King remains one of Bleach's biggest mysteries, as does the strange, primordial world he once inhabited, and the sinister actions of those around him. Originally, the Soul King's imprisonment was written about and delved into in the light novel Can't Fear Your Own World, but these shots of it in the anime are the closest we've ever come to seeing it brought to life before our very eyes. Though fleeting, the images of the Soul King himself, as well as the primordial world, are absolutely captivating, and I dedicated an entire video to trying to pick apart what was actually going on. How did Reio, perhaps the most powerful being to ever exist in the universe of Bleach, find himself in the sorry state we see him during the 1000-Year Blood War arc? As Yhwach's motivations have become more of a focal point in the story, so too has the Soul King. The dark past of the Soul Society is being peeled back piece by piece. In the last video, we looked at the meeting between Aizen and Yhwach, and some fascinating insights brought to light by new information courtesy of Bleach EX, presented by Twitter user Bleach_KRKRK and Reddit user Arturo Plateado. In this video, we're doing the same again, as I think some of you probably anticipated, but this time we'll be taking a look at the new details surrounding the fall of the Soul King that we witnessed ever so slightly in the anime through Ichigo's eyes, as well as some aspects of Ichigo's training with Ichibei. So, let's take a look. First of all, what did we see in the anime itself? During Ichigo's training on the mysterious Irazusando, which we'll also get to in a minute, he bears witness to the Soul Society's original sin, the dismemberment and sealing of the Soul King himself, and presumably the splitting of the original primordial world into the worlds we know today. Soul Society, Hueco Mundo, and the world of the living. We, the audience, only get to see the briefest of glimpses as various images flash by on screen, but it was enough, I thought at least, to piece together some kind of a sequence of events. We see the Soul King, though presumably he wasn't yet known by that moniker at the time, wading into some water, carrying a ceremonial sword of sorts in his arms. This is the very first time we have ever seen Reio in his, shall we say, living form, and it really is very exciting. The Soul King stands in the water, surrounded by 3 whirlpools within which sit glowing arrows. Reio then places the sword into the ground almost like a key, holding the end steady as his body begins to break apart. The rest of it was a little more nebulous, but it looked to me like the Soul King's now limbless torso had fallen over and was floating in the water, his body parts separated from him, arms and legs in the water also. As well as that, we also got a very foreboding shot of a shadowy Ichibei cradling the now crippled Reio, and what an awesome image that is. Really, all of this is what I'd been wanting to see for the better part of a decade, and so I'm glad the anime is touching upon it even briefly. My only real hope is that we get more of this in parts 3 and 4 to come, and hopefully with better clarity too as the truth reveals itself. I'm actually a little concerned, as weird as it may sound, the existence of the answers and information that we're about to discuss makes me wonder if they might be done with this sequence for good, but I hope not. But I'm just kind of thinking, if they had plans to reveal what I'm about to talk to you about in the anime, then why would they have already mentioned it, if that makes any sense at all. Anyway, that's basically everything we gleaned from the Thousand Year Blood War arc anime itself. Highly abridged, of course, but like I said, I've got an entire video on that already if you're interested in learning more. But now we're going to dive deeper into the information, the new info that comes from Bleach EX itself, to learn more about the hidden truth behind the fall of Reio. However, before we talk about Reio himself, we must first discuss the path to him, that of the mystical Irazusando. Irazusando was also an anime-only creation, but it too was fantastic to see. Firstly, it's absolutely beautiful, draped in this shimmering emerald hue that lingers in the air like a thick mist. The entire stone pathway has a spiritual, ethereal feel to it, with talismans hanging from the very shadows themselves, and a looming torii gate ever present at the far end. As part of Ichigo's training, he was given nothing but a wooden sword as Irazusando was conjured by Ichigo, the very walls of his palace peeling away like paper on the wind. And so we watch as the substitute Shinigami makes his way down the path, feeling an increasing weight crushing his body until he's almost entirely consumed by an immeasurable power. While it was never explicitly stated, many of us speculated that Ichigo was using Irazusando as a test to see whether or not Ichigo was capable of becoming the new Soul King himself, should the need arise for it in the future. Ichigo has always been an ominous, untrustworthy figure, working to his own agenda, that of ensuring the ongoing stability of the current status quo, no matter the personal cost to the characters we know and love. One of the most interesting subplots introduced in the source material in the Thousand Year Blood War arc was the idea that Ichigo might not be allowed to return to the human world, to his ordinary life, once he'd attained such a godly power, and that the Soul Society themselves may actually keep him away by force. The idea was that there was a point of no return for Ichigo, and potentially there was no going back. I want to dedicate a video entirely to this plotline another day, but for the purposes of this video, we knew that Ichigo was secretly plotting to entomb Ichigo in the same horrific prison that Reio found himself in, if the world needed it to be. While it's also mentioned in Can't Feel Your Own World that Ichigo could have suffered the Soul King's same fate, here, Bleach EX outright confirms that yes, Irazusando is a test to determine whether or not someone is capable of becoming the Soul King. The wooden sword itself is what becomes heavier and heavier the further along the path the candidate walks, and it's mentioned that there are other additional rules as well. The candidate isn't allowed to lift their heels off the ground, and they can't stray from the stone path itself. As Ichigo continues to make his way along Irazusando, he sees visions of the Soul King's torment as immense power and force threatens to destroy him, with even a vision of the Almighty itself appearing in his eyes. So I wonder then if part of the test is to subject the candidate to everything Reio has been made to endure, perhaps to see if they can both withstand it and understand it as well. It's interesting that there's an actual test to determine potential Soul King candidates of all things. Who created this test in the first place? Ichigo mentions that people can't walk Irazusando without the Soul King's permission, but how true is that? Everything Ichigo says needs to be taken with a grain of salt. We already know that he's acting duplicitously here by withholding information from Ichigo, such as the true, nefarious reason for this test in the first place. I wonder what happens to those who fail the test. Presumably their souls are just obliterated beneath the colossal power and they're removed from existence. Which leads me back to the last question, who created this test and why? I mean, we know why, but who was plotting however many years ago that there would need to be another Soul King? Irazusando has likely been around for an exceptionally long time, so has Ichigo made other candidates walk these stones before Ichigo? Who would that even be, and across how many years has this potentially been taking place? Or is Ichigo really the very first potential candidate ever to walk Irazusando, in which case it's just been sitting there doing nothing for potentially 1,000,000 years? It does seem like that when the Soul King is concerned, whenever we do finally get some answers, they generally only beget more questions, but that's just how it goes. It's also revealed in the information that yes, Irazusando is actually physically connected to Senjumaru's palace. This is interesting because it seems to go against the way the royal palace was depicted in the source material. In chapter 545, Rukia and Renji train at Ichibe's palace, having already been to Senjumaru's, and with Ichibe being the leader of the Zero Division, it does seem to make sense that his palace would be the final destination. It is possible, of course, that Ichigo took a different route due to the nature of who he is, but Senjumaru's palace being connected in this way makes it seem like it should always come after Ichibe's. And to be fair, it makes sense, at least to me anyway, that the final stop would be where you get your new outfit in the end. But yeah, that's everything we know regarding Irazusando. There was a bit more to say than I anticipated actually, but the lore surrounding the Soul King is just filled with so many intriguing questions, and thankfully Bleach EX has given us a few answers regarding this mystical path. Anyway, as for the fate of the Soul King himself, thanks to the information from Bleach EX, we now have a much clearer picture of what actually happened to him. The images that we saw in the anime do indeed reflect the creation of the three worlds that we know today, as well as the mutilation and imprisonment of Reio himself. So, as mentioned before, we see the Soul King making his way into the centre of a pool of water, carrying a ceremonial blade in a way that I think indicates some kind of reverence. It's revealed that the three whirlpools surrounding the Soul King, which presumably represent each of the three worlds about to be born, were being generated by the arrows present around him. Where did these arrows come from? Who placed them there? Perhaps it was Reio. Also, he does have the eyes of a true Quincy after all, so it would make sense that he could create reishi arrows like this, though truthfully we have no idea at all about the makeup of these particular arrows. Anyway, when the Soul King pierced the water in front of him with the ceremonial sword, the arrows apparently shimmered and separated his limbs from his body. Then the water that the Soul King pierced with his blade transformed, solidifying around Reio and becoming his crystal prison. Honestly, that's a really awesome visual, and there you have it. The Soul King was seemingly mutilated and imprisoned at the exact moment the three worlds were created, which would make some sense to me, as he acts as the linchpin holding the universe together. The world of Bleach as we know it was born out of this moment and has been essentially in stasis ever since, the Soul King holding everything together in his suffering. We're not quite done though. As mentioned by both Bleach_KRKRK and Arturo Plateado in the original posts, and as you might have realised yourselves after hearing the explanation, this story is quite different to how the Soul King's downfall was depicted originally in Can't Fear Your Own World. In the light novel, the Soul King's sealing is a result of a scheme by the ancestors of the noble families of Soul Society, hence the Soul Society's original sin. Despite his apparent cooperation with them, the ancestors forcibly removed the Soul King's limbs because they feared his immeasurable power before trapping him forever. Conversely, this most recent version of the story, born out of the anime, seemingly has nothing to do with the noble ancestors whatsoever, at least as far as we can see in the tiny snippets we've been given. As Arturo Plateado mentions in the original Reddit post, Ichibe says in the novel that he didn't view what happened to the Soul King firsthand, but the anime clearly shows him clutching Reio's corpse while looking extremely sinister. Now, it's possible I was right originally in the last video I made on this subject, and what we saw in those flashes was the Soul King's now limbless form being washed downstream somehow, and this is the moment Ichibe retrieves him. However, I'd also argue that Ichigo holding Reio in his arms like that doesn't seem to track with the information we've just been given from Bleach EX. How is he cradling Reio's corpse in this manner when supposedly the water itself crystallized and imprisoned him at the moment of his dismemberment? It feels to me like we've got some conflicting information going on here. What's key, however, is that Ichigo isn't to be trusted. I'd love if it was revealed that he played a crucial part in Reio's death, because he understood the need to have someone of that power hold their new, idyllic, fragile worlds together. So in regards to Can't Fear Your Own World, it's possible Ichigo lied about the entire thing, and what Ichigo saw on Irazusando is what really happened. Or Kubo didn't take the light novel into account at all when working closely with the anime team. We need to learn more to know for sure, but regardless, we have our clearest view yet of what actually happened to the Soul King at the point of the creation of the three worlds as we know them. Now, in the end, we're still left with a lot of questions. Did the Soul King know what was going to happen to him before he began this ceremony? Was this a valiant act of self-sacrifice or a wicked betrayal? Perhaps with the Soul King's seeming infallible ability of foresight, it was actually both. Did the ancestors of the noble houses have anything to do with this at all, or was what we learned in Can't Fear Your Own World inaccurate, whether by design or by oversight? And crucially, how did that ceremony that is so vital to the very existence of Bleach itself even work? What kind of power is able to create three worlds and imprison a godlike being in such a way? Again, I believe in Can't Fear Your Own World it's mentioned that it's through the Almighty that Reio is able to split the primordial world into three, but again, how on earth does that work? I wonder if we'll ever actually find out. What is the ceremonial sword being held by Reio that seemingly rests in the clutches of his severed arm? And ultimately, do the answers to these questions even really matter? Or is it just a case of simply knowing the basics behind it all will do? It is legend, after all. Maybe we're not meant to know the full truth. Like I said, I'm really hopeful we'll dive even deeper into this backstory in parts 3 and 4 of the 1000-Year Blood War arc anime. Even with these flickers of revelation, the mystery of the Soul King is still the most intriguing missing piece of the Bleach puzzle to me. Considering what we've heard so far about the new upcoming season, it does sound like there's going to be a lot of anime-exclusive content, a lot of brand new scenes, and I'm optimistic that the Soul King is included in there somewhere. Alright guys, well that's it for the video. As always, I really hope you enjoyed it. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. How do you feel about all of this new information we've received, whether it's about Irazusando or whether it's about the Soul King himself? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. How do you feel about the information surrounding the Soul King sealing his dismemberment, his supposed betrayal? How do you feel about the way it does or doesn't work with what we know in Can't Fear Your Own World? I'd love to hear all of your thoughts down in the comments below. And as always, I want to end by saying a massive thank you to my supporters over on Patreon. I really do appreciate each and every one of you so very much. It really does mean the absolute world to me. And if you want to support me over on Patreon, you can do just that as well, to get your name in the credits just like this, and to get every single video I release absolutely ad-free. Alright guys, but until next time, I'll catch you later, and I'll see you then.